My dear brothers and sisters, today, Wednesday of Holy Week, we call Spy Wednesday, and it has been known as this for centuries because we hear this gospel in which Judas is looking for a time to hand Jesus over. He is spying out a time. We hear this exchange during the Last Supper where the disciples are saying, "Surely it is not I, Lord." And Judas says, "Surely it is not I, Rabbi." And we hear Jesus respond, "Judas, it is you, and stop calling me Shirley." Okay, that was too deadpan. Okay. But what we want to look at today is the process of temptation. Because if we're honest, sin tries to entice us, and it puts into our heart the seeking of a way to get away with sin. The Desert Fathers, the first monks of the church, if you would, discussed in some of their spiritual psychology the process of temptation, and they used Eve as an example of it. And so this is what they talked about, the 4 stages of temptation. The first is that the devil begins to engage Eve in conversation. Now, right there, she can just say, "Talk to the hand, your mom is a man." Okay? She can just completely shut the devil up. But she begins to take interest. So she starts to listen. That's the first thing. Has she sinned yet? No. She's being tempted. The second, she begins to desire what's being offered. That is, she sees the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and she thinks that it's good for wisdom. So she begins to kind of long for this thing, especially as she's being told that it is something good that will fulfill her, despite the fact that she's already experiencing the fullness of blessings that God could have for her. So this is the second stage of temptation, beginning to desire the object. Has she sinned yet? No, she hasn't sinned yet. And this is important because many times folks will think, "Oh, well, I had these experiences," and I try to tell them in the confessional, "What did you do? What did you decide to do?" "Well, I just brushed it aside." I said, "Good. Instead of sinning, you practiced virtue." The third stage, and they're saying, the Desert Fathers say that as these stages progress, the harder it is to stop the temptation, but it's still possible. It's just that the temptation grows stronger, and so it's going to take much more grace and much more effort to break the temptation. The third stage, and we don't see this in Genesis necessarily, but it is something instinctual, and it's the question of, how can I get away with this? It's the question of hiding it. So we see this in the process of temptation for Judas. He is interested, and he's looking for a way to hand Jesus over. He's interested, and he is trying to plan how he can do it. That's the third stage. Has Eve sinned yet? No, because I said there were 4 stages of temptation, right? So you know that the answer is no, not yet. Okay. Again, it's getting more difficult. The 4th stage of temptation is the decision, yes or no. And that is where a person either commits sin or breaks the temptation, yes or no. When Eve decides, yes, I'm going to take the fruit, and goes to grab it, that is sin. When somebody decides, already has a plan, and decides that they're going to do something that they know is wrong, even if they are somehow prohibited from acting it out, they have still sinned. But on the contrary, too, if somebody is simply tempted and maybe has a plan, but hasn't made the decision yet to actually do it, they haven't sinned yet. This is, of course, helpful when dealing with people who perhaps suffer from depression or have been tempted with suicidal thoughts, to help them recognize the difference between having an idea of how to do the sin, how to commit the sin, but yet not having reached the point of deciding to actually do it. It's very simple. If you decide to actually do it, typically it's followed with an attempt, right? And if there's no attempt, can there really have been a decision? And this can help folks in understanding their conscience, in understanding the process that goes on. So, in understanding these things in terms of temptation, the question that we want to ask ourselves in terms of these stages of temptation is, what am I actually hungering or thirsting for? And how is God calling me to have that hunger or thirst fulfilled in a holy way? Because oftentimes people will try to say, okay, let's just cut off the temptation. But the temptation may simply be a legitimate need of the person that gets twisted into trying to be fulfilled in an unholy way. Folks, and I mention this to folks when they talk to me about being judgmental, I say, I notice that whenever I'm judgmental, typically, if I'm willing to stop and look at myself, what I realize is this, that I might be feeling insecure. I might be afraid of being judged by them. And so the defensive reaction is, let me judge them first. So when I recognize what my actual need is, then I can take that need, turn to God and say, God, you know that I'm feeling a little bit insecure right now. Please fill my heart with your love and renew in me my identity so that I can remember that I'm no better and no worse than anybody else. So brothers and sisters, to help us in this journey of knowing ourselves, we can partner with the Holy Spirit because no one knows us better than God. And no one wants us to walk in virtue more than God. God is more than a cheerleader. He's more than a coach. He is one who loves us so much that he's willing to give us the graces we need in order to overcome temptation, to overcome sin. All he's waiting for is that we ask so as to receive, that we seek so as to find, that we knock so that the door may be opened. May we do so today so that we may know that our hearts may not be all that different from Judas, but as disciples, we may know we can turn to God for the grace we need to avoid sin.